Okay. Okay, we'll get started as we usually do. So, straightening ourselves out. So, we're just starting by feeling. Just starting by feeling and feeling that the bones can rest in the hammocks of the fascia, but also that the organs can rest in the hammocks of their fascia. So everything is in this double bagging system where you've got the organ and it's in its bag. A little bit like, we talk a lot about Christmas puddings, the old Christmas puddings that come in their muslin bags. It's kind of the same thing. So we've got all our organs in their bags, and then they're all in. Some of them are collected into bigger bags. So there's sort of the large carrier bag, and then there's the the shopping organs in their own little bags inside the big bag. It's kind of how it works. And all these bags are tied off into the spine, or they blend into the spine somewhere. So when we start to rest the bones into the hammocks of the connective tissue, and then we've got the organs in their connective tissue, then when we start to relax and feel the ground underneath us, we start to feel that there's, if we're holding tension, and we hold tension viscerally, we have the ability to generate a visceral response to our emotions. So, stress manifests itself in different organs. We know this stuff. So just by letting the legs rest back through the hips and let the arms rest back through the shoulders, we can start to broaden and soften the ribs. Find the shoulder blades might need to readjust themselves around the back of the body a little bit. And can we let the heart in its heart bag, which is a pericardium, and the lungs that sit in the pleura, can we let those bags just rest back towards the back of the chest? And it's all tied off into the thoracic spine. So the more we let the arms come back through the shoulders, the more we let the shoulder blades rest into the ground, the more we let the ribs soften, the more we can let the lungs rest, the more we can let the heart rest. And you might feel that they can soften back a little bit. The voice box will go with it. The tongue will go with it because it's all connected together. So all these sort of upper respiratory things can all soften back. And in there, of course, is the pipe that goes down to the stomach. So we know that that's going to rest that back as well. So as the esophagus gets softened back by the trachea, because they run parallel to each other. So one is behind the other. So as it softens back, they affect each other, and that takes us down through the diaphragm, which of course is connected to the heart, very strongly connected to the heart. So our breathing affects the stomach, and of course the liver and the pancreas and the gallbladder, and they're all under there as well. And they're all in their fascial bags, all sitting just underneath the diaphragm. So breathing affects these structures, causes the heart to go up and down, causes the lungs to go up and down, of course, but also messes around with the organs. So we can start to instill a little bit of softness, a little bit of ease into the upper abdomen. And it's interesting just to notice how the breath changes the structures in these parts of the body, can start to help us to relax. It's deeply calming to the nervous system when we do this. If your hands are on your tummy, sort of just underneath the ribs, you might feel that there's a pulse there. You know, there's a lot of arterial trunking, there's a lot of blood works running through there as well, so you might feel your pulse. And then, of course, underneath that is the intestines in their bags. So it might be that we can just press with the feet and lift one hip and rest it back to the ground, and then press with the other foot, lift that hip, and then just as it rests back into the ground, we're creating space to the side of the waist. And space between the hip bones. And then we've got the pelvic organs, and they're all in their fascial bags as well. And whether those organs are there, whether they're not there, you know, for some of us, we've had organs removed, and that's okay, because the energetic imprint and the fascial imprint of those organs still remains. There are still attachments there, fascially, still bits and pieces that's still there. So we've still got sort of an outline or a shape of what was. And of course, it's interesting when we look down through the body with the brain, sometimes it is very rare for the brain to actually acknowledge that something is missing. We might be aware of a space there, but the brain doesn't, the cognitive brain isn't often aware that the organ itself is missing, and that's because that part of the brain is asleep during surgery. So just wandering down and thinking of those slings in the deep pelvis between the hip bones that hold those organs, bladder, uterus, and the lower parts of the large intestine. They're all there, all those ligaments and slings and all of those things there. So can we let that soften? You know, we've got these passageways that move through from these organs to the external world. If we give the knees a nice wave, we can start to become aware of these three passageways. Can we relax those? And this is where we start to become aware that the outside of the body is not the pelvic floor. That's further up in the pelvis. So maybe we don't have to hold on quite so tightly there. Particularly if we've got sticky tissues or scarred tissues. Can we let that relax and soften? And we can keep pressing, just it's a subtle movement with the feet. It's not so gross that we roll the hips from side to side. It's enough that we're just these micro movements within the pelvis. Helps us to release around the sacroiliac joint. So that joint between the hips and the sacrum, we can get a little bit of space there. And this helps because when the legs can drop back to the back of the hips and the sacroiliac joint is happy, hip flexors and the things at the front of the hips start to switch off or stand down a little bit. Switching off is a bit strong. So if we spread the toes and find the balls of the feet and they can pull down into the ground, we'll find that the pelvis will start to tilt in towards us. Rolling the snooker ball heel on the ground will tilt the hips away. Toes tilts everything in towards you. Rolling through the heels back to the toes. Tilts everything away. So we start to create space in the low spine. We start to connect into the low spine. We're getting awareness into the low spine. Maybe the tissues around the hips start to soften up a little bit. The toes can spread and there's a nice length that starts to happen to the low spine. Takes us all the way up into the underside of the ribs. As the tummy starts to sink back, we start to become up above the tummy button. There's a lot of space to be had there. Can we drop in there and start to feel that the ribs lengthen away from the tummy button? Quite interesting for women how much we're in a state of collapse, not at the lower lumbars, that's the bit that causes us pain, but more in the upper lumbars, between that sort of floating ribs down into the top of the lumbars. So can we really let the tummy sink back there? But we feel a deep strength that happens because there's a lot of ligamentous or connective tissue lay down on the front of the spine there. So we can get space, but we can also get lots of support. The feet of the diaphragm lay here. Psoas lays here. If we look at muscle terms, diaphragm is incredibly powerful muscle. And it's all buttoned in here. So it has the potential to get very pulled together in a state of contraction, but it's also got great potential to soften and lengthen. So if we let the feet just pull down into the ground, the tail starts to come in and we start to walk up through the inside of the spine. Can we let the pelvis be drawn away towards the knees? But the ribs are pulled back and kept on the ground. It's not a big movement. And when we come back down, we're laying the vertebrae back down from the low ribs all the way down through the lumbars into the back of the pelvis, and then the pelvis can roll away. We can come back in again. And it's just these exploratory movements, just noticing how heavy can we leave the back of the pelvis. We drop the shins into the knees, which draw the knees away. So we're working very much into this deep back of the tummy, if you like. And we can just explore one more here. Making sure we've got big toes in the inside of the heels. And we can come back down. And if we just drop the elbows to the sides of the body, just out a little bit, can let the forearms and the palms be heavy into the pointy parts of the elbows. This all helps to broaden the collarbones. And then big toe joint and the inside of the heel of top foot can pull down into the floor, and the long little toe side of the other foot pulls down into the ground. And we start to get this rotational movement. But again, can we start with the subtle, just the feet pulling down into the ground, just the movement of the ankle that causes a minor rotation in the shin bones, that makes space in the back of the knee, that starts to turn the femur bones, thigh bones, into the pelvis, which starts to connect through the pelvis into the deep waist, which starts this rotation. And can we be the observer of the process? Can we just watch the process happen? What happens to the lumbars? Do we need more space between the hips? Can we soften back more between the hip bones? Can we soften the tummy back? And let go of the back of the pelvis a little bit. Maybe the tail needs to look towards the heels a little bit more, particularly if we're pressing with the feet, has a tendency to pull the tail under, flattens the back of the pelvis. So can we leave the drawbridge of the sacrum rolled down and away towards the heels so that the pelvis doesn't get pulled around as we come into our rotation? And then we get more through the obliques, top of that hip, side of the waist, into the underside of the ribs again. And as we come into the rotation, then the tummy button drops back. Can we let the ribs drop back? And it might be that a hand on the top of the ribs is useful, because again, will that give us space at that very bottom of the ribby spine, thoracics, into the top of the lumbars again? So we feel that the legs are hanging out, hanging down from the underside of the ribs, and we can create lots and lots of lovely space. And coming back to the center is that drop through the ribs, the front of the ribs, into the spine. The spine gets drawn into the ground. It's strong on the abdominals because we are pulling the spine back into the ground. The legs just kind of get drawn along for the ride. And at some point, gravity takes the top hip and rolls us back to the center. And then we can come out to the other side. And this one's tricky because now we have to come in with no expectation. But of course, we've already just had a recent experience of what it was like on the other side. So, of course, we're full of expectations of what this side would feel like. But can we just suspend that for a moment and stay in the feet with the movement at the ankle and the rotation at the shins, and just this momentum that just really slowly builds from an initial intention of just pulling different parts of the feet into the ground. That's all it is. That's all it is. So we're just into the obliques. Into the deeper parts of the tummy. And it's interesting because we're always very connected to our periphery. So we know a lot about our limbs. We can talk about hamstrings and glutes and hip flexors and all of that stuff, but we tend to be a little bit disconnected from that very, very deep visceral center of ourselves. Can we feel the stomach and the gallbladder and the pancreas and everything starting to rearrange itself? They're very soft, they're very malleable, they get distorted. It's not a bad thing, but they change their form to respond to the changing body around them. So can we feel that the fascia of the liver starts to move, the pancreas? And all those other lovely organs in there, can we let those all just soften? It is the weight of the bones in gravity that moves us, the connective tissue that responds to our intention. And the organs just kind of, they're quite passive. They just mold themselves along to the ride. So maybe we want to be a little bit more aware of what that ride is. And of course, we know that if there's not a lot of movement here and we're not moving the organs about, they can get a little bit stiff and a bit sticky, stuck to each other in their fascial bags. But also the organs require movement to support a lot of their processes. So if we know that we're not moving very much, we'll do one more on each side. If we know that we're not moving very much, we haven't got much rotating through this part of the trunk, if we've become a little bit stiff or a bit sticky, the ribs and the pelvis are designed to rotate in opposite directions as part of the gait cycle, as part of our walking cycle. But if we're a little bit blockish through the trunk for whatever reason, and that rotation isn't coming from the low ribs and the top of the lumbars, then the organ massage that naturally occurs at that point maybe isn't happening as much as we would like it to. So we're coming through on the second side. Noticing how that was differently, or how it feels maybe to the first time we did our rotations. We're just going to let the knees float in towards you. Let the legs drop back into their sockets. If it's nice to take a hand around each sort of front of the knee, top of the shin, we can just have a little rock from side to side. And again, we're sending the tail away to the end of the mat. Give the feet a nice flick. Lose any tension in front of the ankle, retinacular. There. So we're going to come over onto whichever side is comfortable for you. And find our way into our lovely square pose. So just finding the front of the feet, and we've had the feet in the opposite direction while we've been on our back. So we're just finding the front of the feet pulled down into the ground. And if it's nice to just take the fingers into behind the knees and just softening the tissues there, we send the shin away towards the end of the mat behind you. Notice if one side feels different to the other. And we just find that the shins start to present to the ground a little bit more. And the sit bones can just get pulled away towards the wall behind you. We're taking the weight back and down into the shins. Back and down into the shins, inside of the ankles, big toe joints. And long, low spine. And we just find that there's just a bit of freedom that starts to happen to the front of the hips. We've got a space. So that if we were to look at something like our cat pose here, we've got front of the hips that will disappear into the top of the legs. If we let the drawbridge of the sacrum just roll away towards the end of the mat, the sit bones can go away towards the end of the mat, but we've got a spaciousness here in the front of the hip. So as we take the body weight back into the feet, back into the shins, and let the feet and the shins just pull down into the ground, we can feel, just like our bridge pose, that there's a tilting to the pelvis that happens. And can we let the tummy just be drawn back towards this low spine area, and we start to get a little bit of space there. We can just feel that, and we stay in the low spine. There's always a, you know, what do you call it? Thoracic ribs. The ribs are always very happy to move first. So there's a natural orientation of their of that part of the spine. So can we stay into the low spine initially? So it's just the tail that gets heavy, that goes down into the feet, down into the shins. And like I say, if it's good to bring the pelvis back, it's almost like we sort of come back like we're a coiled spring. And then there's a point where the feet just pull down into the ground, it turns the pelvis under and starts to move us back up through the spine. And again, when we get in behind the tummy button and in that space between the tummy button and the underside of the ribs, can we get in there? That part of the spine becomes free and starts to move. Like I said, very easy to go up into shoulders and shoulder blades and all of that stuff, but can we just leave that alone for a moment? and just hang around in that space. Can we get that space that opens up? And what happens is when the tummy gets pulled back towards spine, and we start to work into that low ribs area, yes, the higher ribs get involved, shoulder blades go up towards the ears a little bit, because it's all pulling that, it's the upper part pulling the lower part open. So our hinge point, if you like, is in this underside of the ribs. And that brings us all the way up through ribs, through shoulder blades, through the inside of the neck, into the back of the head that gets super, super heavy. And nose comes back to the back of the head, which draws the low spine away, neck spine. So the nose goes into the back of the head comes up, which creates space at the base of the skull and the top of the spine. Can we hang around in the neck spine a little bit? It's useful when we do. Because again, it's a place where we can hold a little bit of tension. So can we let the voice box and that part of the neck spine just start to get some space? And that will take us back through the ribs, back through that mid part of the spine. Can we touch in there? And then the low spine will come through the low spine, and then eventually we return to the original position. So the sacrum sort of lifts, rolls away, sit bones go back, and that takes us down into shins and feet. And we can come back into our child pose. It's nice to bring the big toes together and let the knees go a little bit wider. We can bring the elbows down. And we can just rest into here for a minute. But again, the elbows pull down into the ground, which wraps the long arm bones through the shoulders and around the back of the ribs. So the back of the ribs are going forwards, the head is still going forwards, whereas the feet, when we take the big toes in and bring the top of the ankles onto the ground, and then we've got the knees out a little bit, that all helps, again, to feed the legs back through the pelvis into the side of the waist. So even when we're in our child pose, we've still got this integration of limbs that are all coming into this space right in the center of the spine. And it doesn't matter where we are in our, how forgiving the hips are on this one. Doesn't matter if everything stays high. We just keep feet, elbows, little finger sides if you've got hands on the floor and you're working with those. Everything is sending everything back towards that center part of the spine. And the testing ground is you can lift and drop that center part of the spine. So we're suspended, we're not collapsing. This is good. So we're going to tuck the toes under, find our way up to standing. Stay with the feet for a minute if you need to, just pulling the toes down into. Pulling the toes down into the ground. Make circles with the heels. And then, like I say, just finding our way up to standing. And can we feel that the toes are going forwards, the heels are going back? So we're looking to find that place, front of the ankle, into this center part of the foot. And we can roll the feet, outer edges of the feet, inner edges of the feet, and just spreading the toes. But really work with finding that point of balance. The pelvis will rearrange itself according to the weight distribution in the feet. So if we're further back in the feet, pelvis is going to tilt under. It stops you from falling backwards. We're further forwards in the toes, we stick the bottom out. Because again, we're always working with our center line. And we're looking for that to come through the front of the ankle into front of the snooker ball heel, root of the toes. So you know when you've got it because the toes start to have to work, not the toes at the end of the toes here, but toes in the center of the foot. Toes in the center of the foot. Shoes really affect us because the toes in the center of the foot don't get to respond as they need to. They're designed to roll just a little bit. There's a lot of bones up in the top part of the foot and the ankle, and then we've got these sort of longish bones here. So there's a lot of range, there's a lot of movement available to us as the ankle connects down into the foot. There's a lot that's able to happen there, but shoes inhibit that. So can we start to feel that we've got a drop at the front of the snooker ball heel? My teacher always used to say it felt like heels were extending away, at which point I'd start to try and lock out through the knee, but it's a pull down through the front of the snooker ball heel. And then we feel that toes can extend, and then the pelvis starts to sort itself out. So for those of us that have got a tucked under pelvis, it might feel like your bottom starts to stick out. And we feel that a little bit in the low spine. So the brain is now looking for, well, if I don't have this shoring up of the pelvis tucking under, which lengthens the muscles around the spine, which gives us a full sense of stability. But if I don't have that, then what is holding me? It's a valid question. And this is where the balls of the feet and the big toe joint, particularly inner side of the big toe joint, starts to come in. So as we roll the big toe joint inwards and downwards, which is going to be mildly confusing, That's actually, it's a lot confusing. But if you go for the inner side of your big toe joint, it's between the first and the second toe. If you can get a pull down through there, we feel that come up on the inside of the thighs, inner side of the groins, because we've done lots of work softening these structures here in the front of the tummy and the front of the hips. We can start to feel that there's a support that comes into the underside of the sacrum. And this is because the femurs start to look at each other, and the underside of the sacrum, there's a crosshair there. And this fires the connective tissue structures that lay on the front of the spine. And it starts to give us upward lift. It's quite subtle, but it's worth working with it, because when we get it, you'll feel the hip flexors stand down. I won't say switch off, because if they switched off, you'd fall on your face. So that never happens. But they do become less of a major player in the game. And you can play with this. We can let the body weight go forwards into the toes. We can let the body weight go backwards into the heels. And notice how the pelvis shifts itself around in response to that. We let the kneecaps drop. For most of us, we've usually got kneecaps that are in a state of perpetual tension. Most of the time, they're lifting up, and that fires the quads more. So can we take a conscious effort to let the kneecaps go a little bit? Now, kneecaps have a really, really special job, which is to prevent your quads from rubbing on the front of your knee joint. But they can't do that when the quads are lifting them upwards and inwards. It starts to interfere with the knees. So can we let them consciously, can we let them just drop a little bit? And that will take you forwards and down into the front of the ankles and bring you back into the feet again. And this can be challenging for feet. So if you need to give them a shake and give them a break and all of that stuff, do that. And then come back to it again. You know, and for those of us that have got buniony things going on, got a nice one coming in on my right that I've just noticed is, it's not rapid, but it is there. It's building itself over time quite happily in response to disproportionate load from the interior hip and down. So if I was allowed to, that foot would roll in quite happily, and it would load the big toe joint on the interior side, and it would, the bunion there will form in response to force and pressure. So when we get a bit tech with it, and we can do that in these sessions because we've been doing this a long time, some of us a really long time. So the inside of the big toe joint, called the wellspring point for those of us that do acupunctures and energy works and that sort of stuff. So if you've been for acupuncture and they've stuck a pin in between your big toe joint and the second toe, might go off with a bit of a bang. Certainly experienced that one before. But we want to feel that just gets rooted down into the ground, and it changes the feet. It feels like the feet are getting rolled out ever so slightly. And we start to redistribute the weight of the body through the feet, and then things start to happen in the shins. Things start to happen in the knees. We might run into stiff or sticky tissues. So, and that's why we stay for a little while, because the body can sort itself out if it's given the opportunity. And we stay out of the way because we love to interfere. We're like, oh, that's quite sticky. I know, I'll stretch that. And those other things. But if we keep it's almost like She's not here now. She's worn herself out and gone and collapsed in a heap somewhere. But it's a bit like the cat in the cushion, you know, this kind of padding the ground, padding the earth with the foot. So as the tissues of the foot start to respond and they start to soften and we get a little bit more dexterous into there, the ankle soon follows suit, the shin and the calf soon follows suit, and then the knee gets a bit of a sort out as well, and then we get up into the thigh. And you can follow this all the way through the body when you've got the time. Maybe we do a 90-minute workshop on standing. And it's hard work. And when the body gets tired, we allow it to rest. So take a seat, or, you know, come down to laying on your mat when it's enough. It's a practice, not perfect. So can we take the feet a little bit wider? And we're going to turn the toes in a little bit without looking out the knees for those of us that are a little bit that way inclined. Can we keep the knee soft but engaged? And all we're going to do here is just have a look into the ball and socket joint at the hip. Just take the body weight over into the outer side of a heel and pull the heel down into the ground. And it will take the hip over. We get a nice stretch on the inside of the thigh. And then we can pull down the outer edge of the other knee. And noticing, nothing to be done about it really, but just noticing if one side is a little bit snugger than the other. And that's okay. Again, it's not a big movement. But we just start to feel that, and there's a lot of dense connective tissue here at the top of the thigh. It's all buttoning into the underside of the pelvic bones, ischial tuberosities and that sort of stuff. So it is quite dense for a reason. You know, we've got all the pelvic slings in here as well, you know, for the pelvic organs, the pelvic floor and all of that stuff. So we just let that pull. And just notice what happens. We don't want to be collapsing into the lumbars, so keep the ribs up and out of the waist. And that happens because we pull down through the inside of the heel and the big toe. The inside of the heel and the big toe will fire up into the opposite shoulder, and it will keep everything lifting out. If we're not lifting out easily, you can put hands underneath the ribs and physically lift yourself out of the waist. You know, if the body can't, we can lend a hand in that way. And, you know, and practice on both sides, not just the one that you've just gone, ooh, that's a bit tighter than the other side, I'll just stay there then. We come to both sides equally. The walking gait naturally lends itself to being dominant on one side, just like we're left-handed or right-handed in our writing and you know, our day-to-day activities. We tend to have a hand that is more happy to do things, and it's exactly the same in the walking gait. You know, it's in our language, best foot first. So we always set off with our most stable foot. That's what we like to use, and because of that, as a consequence of that, those muscles get used a bit more. So depending, if you're right-handed, and this is a sweeping generalization, if you're right-handed, it's usually your left side that is the stabilizer and might be slightly tighter. If you are left-handed, then it's going to be your right side. But like I say, that is a sweeping generalization. And it might not be true for you. It certainly isn't for me, which threw all the osteopaths into disarray on Saturday, because two of them came up and both said on separate occasions, are you left-handed? No, I am not. But I have been I have got significant medical history to go along with that, so it's not the same for everybody. This is good. So we're going to walk the feet back in and just have a little march on the spot. Notice how your feet feel. Notice how your hips feel. You might find that the legs feel a little bit more, got a little bit more space from the corresponding hip. I'm just going to take hold of the hand. Take ourselves by the hand. It's always a nice thing to do. It's quite comforting. And we can just take the arms. And the arms get drawn out of the waist. So there's a dropping down of the shoulders. There's descending of the shoulder blades. You know, the hands hold quite firmly to each other, because when the hands hold firmly to each other, you pull them apart a little bit in front of you. You can feel that the shoulder blades go towards each other on the back, and we get this space on the collarbones at the front. This is useful. Now, if you've got overactive shoulders, this is a nice one to do while you're waiting for the kettle to boil, or those other things. Just taking yourself by the hands and then seeing if you can just pull the hands apart a little bit. And you'll feel that the elbows go outwards a little bit like hugging the beach ball. For those of you that remember doing hugging the beach ball. And it drops the femur back, wrong bone, drops the humerus, it's all going wrong now, humerus back through the shoulder, connects the arms back to the thoracic spine, which is where we want them to go, because they tend to be a little bit forward, a little bit hanging out of the sockets. So when we do this, what we get is a inwards and backwards and upwards, and what you'll feel is that when they wrap around the back of the ribs, they lift the ribs out of the waist. And again, we can feel that the legs can hang down from the underside of the ribs. We can feel that we've got legs or a space that starts to open up at the base of the ribs, base of the thoracic, into the top of the lumbars. And this front part of the tummy gets sucked back and up. This is where all the organs tie off into here. This is where we get a nice massage for the organs. And the legs can hang down. We get to, long space to the waist. So if you know that your ribs and your hips are traveling towards each other at a rate that might not be useful, we can open that space back up. And we do that by allowing the ribs to just hang from the arms. The arms draw the ribs up, and then we use the legs to just hang from the underside of the ribs. And that will draw the pelvis down, and it will draw everything else down into the ground. That's where we want to be. We just let everything in the middle, and then we can come back. It's good. It's a great one to do if you're walking your dog or taking a walk in the countryside, all of that stuff. We have actually got some sunshine, even though it's blooming freezing, but we are actually getting outside a little bit more. It's a great one to do if you're out in the woods, because your feet have to deal with this lovely environment underneath it. It's a more natural environment, but we also get the space to the waist, and then that promotes the rotation. It is literally a sporadic motion of the rotation of the ribs and the pelvis in the this is an exaggeration, there's not that much of a massive rotation, but when we're in the gait cycle, we've got pelvis going one way and the ribs going the other way, pelvis going one way and ribs going the other way, and that gives us that rotation. Not a rotation from the lumbars, it's a rotation from the base of the thoracic spine, base of the ribs, where the floating ribs are, into the top of the lumbars. They are the place that's got the most rotation in the spine. That's where we want it to be coming from. But when it's stiff and it's sticky between the base of the or the pointy parts of the shoulder blades, when we're stiff and sticky across that, smile across the back of the ribs, and it's not rotating properly, then the lower lumbars will take the hit. Forces the work into a place where it's not supposed to be. And this is where a lot of our low spine issues come from. The head's got a lot, we can't get into that now, but the head's got a lot to do with that as well. As soon as the head comes forwards and the shoulders roll a little bit, then the thoracic can't rotate as it needs to. Good. So if we bring our arms down, I'm sure you have already, because I've been waffling on and you're probably all, you know, half dead by now. So just noticing how the arms and the legs feel. And we're just going to come down to sitting or laying, however feels nice. We're just going to just take a moment. If you've utterly had enough and it's time to have a lay down, lovely. If you want to sit with the sofa at your back or the wall at your back or something like that, then that's absolutely lovely too. So just find what's comfortable for a minute. And just letting the bones rest. Bones rest in the hammocks of the fascia. Of course they do. The jaw rests in the hammock of the fascia. It buttons itself around the back of your head. Everything's going in sort of diagonal loops. So your jaw loops up and back into the back of your head. The ribs loop up and back. You know, your organs are looping up and back to between the shoulder blades. Same with the pelvis, it's going up and back into the up of the lumbar. So everything is on the diagonal, ascending. You know, when we think of everything, you know, we call it a pelvic bowl and a rib cage. And when we think of all these things on a level plateau, then now we've got something that's more columnar. And it's a stacking system, and when you put a stacking system into gravity, it becomes very stiff and very heavy and quite rigid. There's not much mobility or flexibility. But if you turn that stacking system at an angle and then make slings, these lovely elastic slings around a spine, then now we've got something that can be drawn up and back, always up and back. And then we're more resilient to gravity that way than we will ever be with gravity falling down through us on a horizontal plane. So just noticing the breath. A nice breath in broadens the ribs, a nice breath out drops the shoulders. A nice breath in broadens the ribs. And there's a lift out of the waist, and the nice breath out drops the shoulders. And lengthens the neck and sends the jaw into the back of the head. Good. You've worked hard today, lovelies. Go gently with yourselves. If you're laying on the floor, just let the knees come in towards you. Give the knees a nice hug. And have a little rock from side to side. Come over onto whichever side and it's comfortable. Come back up to sitting in your own time. It's good. And thank you so much for joining me today. Hopefully that's useful.
That was lovely. Thank you, Kaz.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, Kaz. Just what was needed.
Oh, good.
I moved.
Yes, definitely.
Oh, you have moved. Hurrah. So you're in your new home?
Yeah, I'm in my new home.
Ah, at last.
I know.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just kind of finding, my space, so to speak. But I've got a carpet And it makes so much difference to have a carpet. It's so nice. I didn't have a mat. I can't find my mat.
But you do have a carpet though,
But
so
I've got a carpet, yeah, and a sheepskin.
lovely.
Oh, that's all right.
A whole new way of doing yoga, so to speak.
Yeah, you are. It's very interesting. I remember my teacher confiscating my sticky mat. It was a shock.
Yeah, yeah.
It feels nice. The cotton mat feels lovely, but you have to rethink everything around the grip.
Yeah, totally.
Interesting.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Do you have time
indeed.
for me to ask one question? And I
Yes,
hope
of
if it's
course.
a long one, sorry, and
No,
another
not
time.
at all.
I'm looking at sandals, and I'm looking at is there anything detrimental when you have a thong between your big and first toe?
That's a good question. Great.
Good question. Got to bring it into the class.
It is. It is. I'm still recording, so if you have to go, that's fine, and it will be at the end of the recording if you want to come back and hear it. But no, there is nothing wrong with having a thong between the toe. The thing with sandals is we want our sandals to hold on to our foot. If you look at Romans,
Well, I have to have an ankle strap with that.
yeah,
So yeah.
because the thing with when we've just got the single thong at the front, then the thing is then we tend to grip with the toes, and then that causes claw feet or monkey feet or whatever you want.
Tendinitis is what I've had.
The what? Sorry.
Tendinitis when I've been
Yeah.
gripping with my toes.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's looking sort of at how is your sandal going to hold on to your foot so that your foot doesn't have to hold on to your sandal. That's the question. Is there a problem having thongs between toes? No, I don't think there is. I don't think there is. And actually, when you've got, we call it interesting feet, putting the thong between here makes no difference at all. It just sort of wags around in the ether.
Wow.
But like I say, I think I'm definitely a big advocate of, the strap that comes around the back of the heel, because
I
then
have
we
to have
don't
that.
have to grip with the
Yeah.
toe. For the love of all things holy, please don't buy flip-flops.
No.
I have a real issue with them. Because they're not kind to feet at all, particularly the heel. And I haven't met anybody yet that has had flip-flops that hasn't ended up with pains in the butt. Yeah, because the glutes start to overwork, which of course the deep six sit underneath, and it all hell breaks loose. They're lovely for the first summer, the second summer, when you forgot that you bought them by the second summer, you're like, oh no, something's going wrong. Yeah. And it can't possibly be the flip-flops because I've had them for years.
That's interesting. Yes.
So
I have had them in the past.
looking at we want to protect ourselves from the ground. So a lot of, if you are barefoot trained, then yes, you can have, a bit less underneath you. But if you're walking on the concrete and stuff with your sandals, then you do want a bit of padding between you and the concrete, because again, that's where the heel and the big toe starts to take the hit.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
I find that it's the shape of the insole bit that affects the way that you walk.
Yeah.
I always wear the toe post sandals.
Yeah.
I love them, but I'm very careful about the shape and also the surface of what I'm walking on.
Yeah.
Inside the sandal.
Absolutely. And I think I do own a pair of Birkenstocks, which is great if you have an arch. But
It's great if you've got wide feet. If you've got narrow feet,
yeah, Birkies don't work.
They fall off you.
Again, very stiff sole.
Yeah.
Right. So the other thing with sandals is they have a tendency for this very stiff sole. And again, is that when we're looking to promote a rolly sort of a foot, You know, I quite like Merrell's for that, you know, where you can bend them in half. That sort of a thing. So yeah, being, you know, careful about what are you going to be walking on. So if you're, you know, doing the laps around the pool and it's all concrete there's an idea, isn't there? Laps around the pool. You know, but and also, you know, if you're pounding up and down the high street or you're sightseeing on your holiday and you're wearing your sandals for that, then, you know, yes, we're going to want a supportive sandally thing, which was a little bit different than if you're going up and down the sandy beach. It's getting worse and worse, isn't it? But if you're going up and down the sandy beach, that's a different sort of a flip-flop. And actually, if you're on the sand and you can get onto cool sand, then, you know, no shoes, because it's the best workout for feet ever. In fact, let's all go to the beach now and try that.
And the best grounding.
Yes, but you know, it's a really good workout for feet, well, walking on the sand. Definitely.
You'll have to show us what you end up with, Sarah Jane.
Thank you.
Yes, can we have sandals show and tell?
Well, I've looked at Piccolino because I've got slim feet, and Piccolinos have suited me in the past, you know. Yeah.
The Italians always do a nice slim.
Exactly. And it just,
Any of the Mediterranean shoes fit.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you've got slim feet.
Yeah, if you've got blocks for feet, it's no. I
always
fall off the edges of my sandals. They've always got a little toe that's touching the floor somewhere.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much, Kaz. Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
My favourite pair, Skechers yoga, something they are. Skechers, yeah. They're my favourite.
Yeah.
But the strap from the toe post comes quite high up the foot. It doesn't way short.
Yeah.
I wanted to say I was reading an article, funnily enough, on Tutankhamun's sandals the other day.
Yeah.
And they were all rotted out, but they reconstructed them all. And he had toe posts, you know, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. They were wearing toe post sandals, so there can't have been that much wrong with them. But he also had an additional strap across the higher part of the foot.
Yeah.
So he had the toe post and then another strap for that thing of holding the shoe on firmer.
Yeah. When I went to the British Museum, I loved the Egyptians and I took photos of all their feet. So
the gate guards.
do need to get out a little bit more. I also went around the Greek section, you know, where they're and actually the marble feet, you know, the way that they cut the marble for the feet is absolutely fascinating. And you know, the Greeks, very muscular feet. Whereas with the Egyptians, they're very rarely bare feet, you know, when they're standing on the boat and they've got their, you know, the spears and all of those different statues, they've all got sandals on. And yes, they have the toe post with the straps that come up, and then there's an ankle strap around it. So yeah, it's very much keeping how do we keep the sandal on the foot so you don't have to use your foot to keep the sandal on. So
everywhere we go, we look at their feet on the statues and things because they've all got lovely wide toes with space.
Yeah. Rhonda wrote about it in her book. You know, go to the British Museum and see how they stand. You know, there's significant upward lift under the rib. You can see that because it's hollowed out and there's this very long waist there. And then everything comes down into this very long foot. But they're, you know, if you look at them from the side, they are very much present in that front aspect of the ankle down into the foot like we were looking at today. So they knew how to stand. They knew what they were doing.
I have to go. I'll see you guys.
My love.
Let's go.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
You're very welcome.
Stay with me.
I'm staying.
Because I haven't talked to you.
Well, no, I've been in uni.
Just want to have a chat about this parathyroid thing.
Right.
Go.
I don't know anything about it. I think I can boot you out, Lisa. Hang on.
Well, please do.
Please do. Just, yeah, I can. Hang on, let's remove you. No, I do not need to report you to Zoom. You are not a member. Let's do that. Okay. Right, I've done Lisa. Okay, she's gone. She's
I'll
gone.
get it out there. Well, it looks like it is parathyroid. I can't find anything that would explain why parathyroid and calcium are high, and that's parathyroid.
Right.
And it can be rarely an autoimmune issue, but that was rare, or an adenoma or something, which is like a benign little tumor on it.
Right.
And they snick it off,
Okay.
parathyroid out. But I'm fucking pissed off if that's all it has been for the last 5 years and nobody's ever tested for it.
So what do you have to do to get the test?
That's what they did the blood test on Friday.
Right.
Came back and she said, yeah, it's high. Your calcium and your parathyroid are high.
Okay.
She kept hedging. She was a little Indian doctor and she was saying, well, it's high, but it's not really high, but I would consider it high. But it's not really high, but I'd consider it high.
Yeah, because it's
That-
not out of range.
That's the referral to endocrinology to take that
Okay.
further. And then I'm thinking, as I've got out of control, uncontrolled AFib, it's a 16-week wait according to the NHS wait list on Derriford.
Right.
4 fucking months.
Yeah, that's a long
But
time.
I'm wondering if I'm bouncing ideas off you, whether I'll be expressed through as I've got this atrial fibrillation unmanaged.
Yeah.
But if
So
calcium,
what's their plan going forward then?
well, refer me to endocrinology.
So they're
Well,
not going to do the CT scan now
yeah,
then?
well, they should do it. But of course, I got booted out, didn't I, along with a load of others. So that'll be hopefully Thursday. Don't know when. But the trouble with the high calcium in the blood, the parathyroid controls calcium levels, and
Right.
it'll either get it from your diet or it'll leach it from your bones.
Okay.
So there's going to need to be a DEXA scan in there.
Okay.
My mother had osteoporosis, and
Yeah.
she
When
had
did you get
AFib.
that?
She had AFib, and it looks like she probably had the same fucking problem, unidentified.
Right.
And they're just because the parathyroid controls heart rate.
Right.
Parathyroid issues cause arrhythmias.
Right.
That's where it's coming from. There's a new young doctor. She looked quite young, and honestly, she took one look at me and she said, "I want to test your parathyroid and your
Right.
calcium." So she seemed to be on it. Whereas all those bloody men I've seen, nobody's gone further into it to find out why and why it doesn't respond to drugs. Don't respond to any drugs. So as I'm out here unmanaged, I'm hoping I might get fast track
Oh yeah.
rather than 16 weeks for a first consult and 40 weeks for a treatment.
Oh dear.
It was looking down the barrel of if it's going to be like that, I go bloody private again. Because I'm thinking I can't travel. I certainly can't travel alone with this
Yeah.
rattling around, can I? That's shutting down this summer now. The wider picture is I don't want to get stuck in Italy and get a bloody great AFib episode
Yeah.
and possible angina whacking in. I can't travel now. So the time frame, and apart from the fact that if there's too much calcium in the blood, it calcifies the arteries in the heart, hence the angina.
So what's their answer? Is that where the calcium channel blocker thing comes in then?
Tried that way back at the very beginning. They tried calcium channel blockers and they didn't work. I think you couldn't have them if you had COPD diagnosis.
I see.
I'm thinking right back.
Right.
They say, oh, well, what have you had? Well, I'm talking bloody nigh on 5 years. Yeah, it's 5 years. 2020, my first episode was in January 2020. 5 bloody years and somebody's just getting around to digging further into it. I'm
Yeah.
not happy. Anyway, it was fortunate it kicked off when I went in on Wednesday and they were
Yeah.
fully watching what I was going through,
Yeah.
what my poor heart was going through, because that was a 5-hour episode.
Yeah.
Kicked off at 11. They managed, well, they said they shut it down with digoxin at 5,
Yeah.
around about 4 or 5 o'clock. But yeah, I'll tell you what, when the old ECG went into tachycardia and it changes the beep and it goes beep, 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 beep. And they all came running around the curtain.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I thought, oh, that's gone really tachycardic now. But anyway, so that's all been logged.
Right.
Yeah.
So
And
hopefully they will do the scan on
hopefully
Thursday
they'll
then.
crack on a bit bloody faster. But if it's 5 years of this being untreated for parathyroid and it's fucking up my heart with calcium, I ain't happy.
Oh, yeah.
Trying not to obsess, I'm not obsessing, I'm just starting to think the wider picture. I'm pretty sure I've never heard anybody say they've tested my parathyroid. And it's more common in women over 60.
Right.
There you go. Bang on the number 62. I think I kicked in on this. Yeah, so interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with my poor little heart. And I was thinking, all this stuff I've tried over the years to blank this down, all these bloody supplements all over my kitchen worktop that make me look like a fucking hypochondriac. And it's something I could not have fixed myself. There you go.
Oh no.
Yeah,
But you have tried everything.
I tried everything.
And and they're very limited on time in the NHS, aren't they? So no, they don't get the opportunity to dig deeper, and they only specialise in
Yeah.
in their own specialist subjects. So no, a cardiologist isn't going to look at you with an
He
endocrinologist
sat there, what, 6
brain.
weeks ago, he sat there and said, we don't know why people like you get it and others don't.
Right.
You don't investigate any further. You just, you
Yeah,
don't do
that's all
anything
they've got
about
time
it.
for, though. They just stick plasters on people. That's all they
Yeah.
can do.
They weren't happy in SDEC when they said, what's cardiology doing? I said, well, nothing. He signed me off and said, see you in 12 months. Unless it lasts over 24 hours, don't bother coming in. And they did not look happy about it. Really didn't look happy about it.
Right.
I mean, well, what medication are you on? I said, I'm not on anything. Oh, it's like that. Oh, fucking hell. So yeah,
You have
interesting.
caught something.
I have, honestly, it's all in my
It's
gland.